Mr. Thompson here. We're looking at Standard 4 for U.S. history, analyze the ideological, military, social, and diplomatic aspects of the American Revolution. More specifically, we're looking at Part C of that standard, analyze George Washington as a leader, including the influence of Baron von Steuben, Marquis de Lafayette, and the significance of Valley Forge in the creation of a professional army. The Continental Congress appointed George Washington to be the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army in June 1775. Washington had developed an excellent military reputation in the French and Indian War when he led the British and Virginia forces out of the ambush that killed British commander William Braddock. After his appointment, Washington reorganized the Continental Army, secured additional equipment and supplies, and started a training program to turn inexperienced recruits into a professional army. As a field general, Washington wasn't the most skilled commander. Despite losing many battles, Washington's strong personality and reputation gave him the support and respect of American soldiers. The Revolutionary armies were composed of two distinct groups, the state militias and the Continental Army. Militias were organized by each state and community and generally provided their own weapons and uniforms. Enlistments were short-term, and the training was poor among the militia groups that Washington had to manage as a supplement to the also struggling Continental Army. The militia groups were notoriously unreliable in battle. Washington once remarked that militia units come in, you cannot tell how, go, you cannot tell when, and act, you cannot tell where, consume your provisions, exhaust your stores, and leave you at last in a critical moment. It was for these reasons that Washington urged the Congress to provide for the creation of a standing army, the Continental Army. In the newly created Continental Army, enlistments were from 1 to 3 years. Pay wasn't that great, rations were short, and the army often had to scavenge to find supplies of food and fuel. Disease, brought on by close quarters and poor sanitation and poor diet, was sometimes a bigger danger than the British Army. The most common camp killers were influenza, typhoid, typhus, and dysentery. The new Continental Army, faced with these challenges, limited their deadly effects through the work of surgeons, nurses, a smallpox inoculation program, and camp sanitation regulations. Washington's skill at maintaining his force under trying conditions is best shown during the winter months of 1777 to 1778, when his American army was encamped for the season at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. In the campaign of 1777, British forces tried to combine their Canadian forces with their forces in the American colonies. If successful, this plan would have split the American colonies between North and South along the Hudson River. The British failed to accomplish their goal when they lost at the Battle of Saratoga in New York. The British failed to accomplish their goal when they were defeated in central New York at Saratoga. A third British force attacked and successfully captured Philadelphia in September 1777. Washington attempted to recapture Philadelphia but failed. With winter approaching, Washington withdrew the Continental Army into a winter encampment. The winter weather was harsh and the soldiers lacked adequate supplies. The army remained intact during trying conditions thanks to Washington's strong leadership. The critical success of the winter at Valley Forge proved to be the further development of the army. European soldiers like Baron von Steuben and Marquis de Lafayette arrived at Valley Forge to assist Washington in making the winter months at camp productive by training the soldiers to be more effective when fighting resumed the following spring. Baron von Steuben had been recommended to Benjamin Franklin by the French Minister of War as someone who would be helpful in developing the American army. Once in America, Steuben was instrumental in teaching close order drill that was critical for the maneuver and fire tactics of 18th century warfare. He created a military drill manual that was written in French. George Washington's close aide, Alexander Hamilton, translated the manual into English. Valley Forge essentially became a boot camp to develop American soldiers into more knowledgeable and trained fighters. Marquis de Lafayette also assisted in the professionalization and training of American forces during the winter at Valley Forge. He was a well-connected Frenchman who believed deeply in the American cause and volunteered to serve with Washington and help to secure French resources. Lafayette worked very closely with Washington and was very successful and brave during many battles of the American Revolution, including Brandywine Creek and Yorktown. The French aristocrat was a critical link between the American forces and the French alliance. George Washington was a successful military commander because he recognized his force's limitations in training and supplies. He forged a path to success based on the resources he had available and utilized the assistance of others who were supportive of the American cause. The winter at Valley Forge could have easily dissolved the American forces as enlistments were coming to an end, and desertion was a great possibility for many soldiers given the trying conditions and the limited success the Continental Army had experienced. Washington's great leadership ability is evident in not only convincing soldiers to remain in the military, but to use the winter productively through training and assistance from Baron von Steuben and Marquis de Lafayette. That wraps up Standard 4, Part C, looking at George Washington as a military leader, including the influence of Baron von Steuben and Marquis de Lafayette, and the significance of Valley Forge in the creation of a professional army.